So, welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and normally Don Kinsler, but he's on break today. And so I am at our friend Britta Trygstad's house, and Britta is a photographer known as Britta the Photographer, business-wise. And Britta, you recently did a talk at Garden Palooza with Don about how to photograph your garden and photograph flowers. So I thought that this would be a fun time to come over to your house. We're here in your backyard, and we can talk about how you go about doing that, because I think that that's something that people would like to do more of, and just how they could maybe take better photos for their garden. We're not talking necessarily award-winning photos, but photos that you can look back, because I know sometimes I look at and I'm like, oh, I don't understand what I was actually shooting here.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for a lot of people is that they think that they need to be a professional photographer in order to take good photos. And I mean, obviously it's something that takes a little bit of practice and time to learn the craft, but anyone can really take a great photo of their garden.
Like, how much of your do you take photos of your garden and post them on Instagram, or do you have, and then how much of that is with your professional camera versus with your phone?
Well, like most people, I don't have a big old camera all the time with me, so it's usually just my phone. And actually, I think your phone is like the best camera to use for many things. I mean, I think about how the camera on the phone is better than my first digital camera. Like, these are such great tools. And you have it in your pocket at all times. Does most of the work for you, so you don't have to worry about like lighting and figuring out exposure and all those things. It kind of does everything for you. So for me personally, it's mostly my phone. Taking a picture, putting it on Instagram, especially if I have like really beautiful flowers. And
so for me, I use it a lot to take photos. I don't necessarily even post them, but there's a really nice breeze now. This is so great. Yeah. So great to be doing a show outside. But it's really nice to take photos of the process too, so that way I can remember, because this is, as we talk about on the show a lot of times you plant something and you think, or early in the spring, you're like, look at it, like, we need to fill in areas. Yep. And you forget in 2 or 3 months, it's going to be totally full. Yeah. So it's good to have those photos to go in and remind. And also photos to identify things too.
Absolutely. And I think, even better is like photographing your garden through the whole season and then taking a look at it later from beginning to end and figuring out, like, that worked awesome. I planted that in the right time. That one looked not so good, like in the later fall. Like, what can we do to change it for next year? So I know I've done that for myself, because I have some garden boxes out here in our yard, and they've kind of transformed from year after year. And I'd love to look back and say, hey, so which garden boxes did I have tomatoes in last year? Right. We're going to put in a different one. I usually don't write those things down, but I do take photos all summer long, so I can actually visually see like where things were from one year to the other, so that I can kind of mix it up and change it. And for gardening, especially in our area, it's really important to know the shade situation. Yes. And so taking photos, if you're at home one day and the sun's out, take photos like about every 2 or 3 hours, and you can see the progress of the shades. You can tell yourself how much, I know that now that area gets 8 hours of sun. Yeah. Something like that. Absolutely. And I think too, just thinking of taking photos, both you want to appreciate what you've done well, but again, using it as a tool to kind of see what you've done before. So I think that's a great idea. It's great. It's kind of like a notebook. Yeah. Really. That's the way I use mine. Yeah. Really is for that. And then you just do, when I pull up my big library of photos, I just type in a search like garden or flower, and they'll come up, and they'll be able to see that and what I've done. I know quite a few avid gardeners who actually have a whole spreadsheet of their gardens, and they put the photos in there so that they can see like, that was like an awesome. Smart and organized gardeners do that. I'm not there yet. Me either. I try, but then I'm one of those gardeners who tries really. I mean, I started my seeds in February, March, and got them all in the ground, and then it gets to be mid-July, and I'm like, well, it is what it is. It's awfully hot to be outside. And it is. I'm so envious of gardeners who can just they're into it the whole season. I'm like, you guys. Those who are dedicated. They are. So let's talk a little bit about the idea of the two different aspects of photography that we're talking about here. One is for kind of pictures for show, pictures to, kind of
maybe you want to make nice pictures of your garden.
Yeah.
But then also pictures to do as notes or documentation.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I think people will wonder about too is like the angle which you shoot at and how close you get.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to take a picture for show, maybe you really want to be in close on that lily. So let's talk about one of the things. Well, first of all, let's talk about like where do you set up? And set up, I just mean stand.
Yeah.
If you're going to take a picture with your phone, like how close do you get to things?
It really depends on what you want to get captured, right? So if you want kind of a whole landscape of your garden, be like, this is what it looked like this year. You're obviously going to shoot from farther away, and you can probably stand while you're doing that and getting like a wider photo. But if you're photographing, say you're photographing a zinnia or a sunflower or even something lower to the ground like a lily, you want to get to the level of that plant so you can see it at the plant's level. That's kind of a basic rule for most photography, is getting at the level of your subject. And I think a lot of people tend to like just shoot from above.
Right.
But there's so many opportunities to get down to the level or even below if you want kind of a different kind of shot.
Well, because if you shoot from above, even if you have something like, I see there's daylilies, there's some irises here, so things that would have height. But if you're shooting if you're 5'6", and you shoot from that level and you're shooting down, everything's going to become kind of flat, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And you won't be able to tell that height difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't really, the big thing too is just getting as close as you can for some of those photos, kind of getting more of a macro shot or getting just close up. And that's really when you want to get at the level of those plants so that you can really highlight the actual interesting things happening either in the the foliage or the flower itself. And you can't simply get that from just shooting right above it.
And that's kind of the nice thing, again, about shooting with your phone is that, because you've got a big screen as your viewfinder, basically, you don't have to get down on your knees.
No,
right? You can just kind of, hold it down, at your waist or lower or however low you need to be, and you can take as many pictures as you want, and then you can look through them right away.
Yep, you sure can. But there is something awesome about just getting at the level.
Yep.
It kind of takes you out, gets you out of your mind a little bit. And I think just taking your time in those situations and kind of being one with nature gives you an opportunity to do that, especially if you're trying to get a really cool artistic shot.
It does put you there, too.
Yeah.
And it allows you to get not only a different level just from that shot, but then you get down to that level and you can see other things that are happening. Maybe you'll see some things that, I know in our yard, we've got some plants that have been kind of overgrown by big hostas.
Yeah.
So you don't see that until you get down there, and then it also helps you realize I should move those.
Yeah, and also think too, the things that are living in your garden are really fun to do. So if you can get down to the level, maybe you'll see the the ladybugs that are climbing all over those flowers, or the bumblebees with their big old bumblebee butts. Those types of things are hard to see when you're far away and when you're not at the level. So I think getting down the level and actually looking at your plants is a good perspective to have for photography.
How about even something even if you're going to shoot just as a reference or as a note, kind of a visual note, do you want to be careful or considerate of the light? Because I suppose that probably at noon when the light is directly above you, again, everything's just going to be kind of washed out and flat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think following the basic golden hour rules, so there's blue hour in the morning and golden hour at night. And so if you think about when you first wake up, how low the sun is in the sky, and in the evening, how low the sun is in the sky in the evening as well, those are the best times to take photos of your garden because you're just having this beautiful light that nature is providing. When it's midday, that sun is right overhead and it just washes everything out. And so your garden could be gorgeous. And if you take a photo in the middle of the day, it's going to seem kind of bland. So really striving for morning and late afternoon, early evening, or probably early evening in the summer. What's 9 o'clock when the sun goes down. So it's 7, 8 o'clock at night. That's the best time to photograph your garden, either as a reference to what your garden looks like, or for those more artistic shots. Yeah.
All right. We're going to take a quick little break, and when we come back, more with Britta the Photographer and taking pictures in your garden.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back. Dawn is off this week, but we've got Britta Trygstad here, and we're in her backyard recording and looking out on a great, great garden here. And Britta did a talk at Garden Palooza, which Dawn hosted back in, was it April?
April.
Yeah. And about how to take pictures in your garden. And you've been a photographer how many years?
Well, I've been a photographer professionally for nearly 20 years, and I've owned my business for a little over 12 years.
And the business name?
Britta the Photographer.
Easy to remember.
Super easy.
Super easy. But so you know photography.
Yeah.
Like you went to school, you studied in school too, right?
Yep, I went to Minnesota State University Moorhead, and actually I went for photojournalism.
Yeah.
Journalism. So I kind of have a background in journalism, but obviously photography has played a big part.
But like you said in the first part of the show, while you're trained in photography and you've studied it, and you've worked at it, taking a picture is anybody can take a picture with their cell phone. They shouldn't feel so intimidated that they need the proper gear or knowledge, or you don't need to have the book smarts to do it, right?
Yeah. Photography is such an accessible art. Almost everyone has a camera in their pocket. It's your phone. And so really it's just taking the time just like to breathe and to look at what you're photographing to make a good picture.
So let's talk about some kind of primers on some basics of this. Like there are some things that you should do probably before you even take that picture, right?
Yeah. I often say, again, like you don't need a fancy camera to, take pictures of anything. Really, your phone does a lot of work. But there's a couple phone things that I think that everyone could kind of do to make a better picture. The first one is like making sure that lens on your camera or on your phone is clean. Oftentimes, I don't know about you, but like it's in my back pocket while I'm gardening.
It's in my shirt pocket.
Yeah, so
right.
It gets all gunky and full of sweat and fingerprints and all that stuff. So making sure like when you're photographing, anything that your lens is clean, you can just use a lens cloth. Sometimes I use my t-shirt. I don't think you're supposed to, but you can do it. And just making sure that's clean. And oftentimes when you see, if you're looking through your camera and it's all smudgy and cloudy, it's usually just because your lens is dirty. So just cleaning that up a little bit, that will help so much with those photos.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think, your phone takes care of a lot of like the stuff. When you point your camera somewhere, it will take care of exposure. But there's one little trick you can do to kind of better focus on what you want in the photo. And most phones have like a little tap function where you tap the phone and then your phone camera will actually focus to that point and expose for that point. So you can just tap your phone and it'll expose exactly where you want. So say you're taking a picture of a lily, right? And you're just like, okay, here's the lily. I'm close up, but the leaf is in focus and I want the lily in focus. All you have to do is just tap that lily, the flower, and it'll get right in focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think people will use a lot, I see it a lot, especially like at concerts or things like maybe where they're at a distance way, people will use their to zoom in.
Yeah.
And it's really not a great thing, especially for flowers, is it? I mean,
No.
it's a tool, but it doesn't have the same results as getting closer.
Yeah. And it's so funny. It was my phone. I have a nicer, it's an iPhone Pro, so it's got three lenses on the camera or on the phone. So, I can zoom in a little bit and it's fine, but most cameras or most phones don't have that. So when you're zooming in, the quality really just goes down. One thing we were always told when I was in school was that, the best, actually this was a Wayne Goodmanson line. He was a professor at MSUM. He said, the best lens you have or the best zoom you have is your feet. So it's just really getting in to the level of the plant, getting as close as you can, and that's going to be way better than using, the zoom function on
And don't be afraid of getting close to your flowers. No.
I mean, I know some people are scared of bees, but other than that, there's nothing to be scared of.
Let's talk about something like that too. Like like you said, you can't really focus as much because the phone focuses for you. Yeah. It's all automatic.
Yeah.
But can you play with like a photography they call depth of fields? Like something in the foreground would be sharper, something in the background would be.
Well, I know, I am no iPhone expert. I'm probably just as good as the next, 40-some-year-old. But, there's the portrait function that works quite well. I know on the iPhone, I'm sure that Android has something similar where it will it will select, or you can select what you want in focus, and then it will automatically give you like a blurred background, which kind of gives you a little bit more of a professional camera look.
And you talked a little bit about, too, that sometimes I think people like me, like if you're fumbling through your phone, sometimes things pop up that you didn't intend. One of which is a grid when you're taking pictures. Talk about how you can use that to your advantage.
Well, so in every phone, there is a way to enable a grid. And it's basically, I think there's like a 6-point grid and there's also a 9-point grid. And so you want to enable the 9-point grid. And so what it'll do is it'll create little lines on your phone screen, which will tell you where the thirds are in your frame.
What are the thirds? What do you mean by that?
So the thirds are, so if say you're taking a piece of paper and you're going to fold it in thirds and on the way down and then thirds on the way up. The thirds are kind of the third part of the frame.
Okay.
And so then that is really where our eyes tend to go, is in those third sections. So you want to divide your frame in thirds, and you're going to place those elements along these lines. So again, taking your frame, divide it in threes, and that's what that awesome grid does. And then this will kind of ensure that we have a balanced composition. So say we have a picture of a field of flowers. If you have the main flower, in the lower third section, and maybe some more action happening in the upper third, that gives a nice balance, instead of just, photographing right smack dab in the middle.
And not that there's anything wrong with it. You could do that.
Yeah.
But think it's a phone. You're not paying for film.
Yeah.
Play around with it. And chances are it'll be nice to have some other things going on in that photo.
And that grid just makes it easy.
Yeah.
It shows you like, okay, these are the places that you should, work on putting your subject, and then it just makes it easy.
Well, and you think about it too, like anytime you see any kind of great landscape, even in North Dakota where things can be relatively flat, you relatively see a depiction of the landscape with it going right across the middle of the frame, right?
Yeah.
It's usually on the lower end or on the higher end, or it's in that thirds that you play with that. And that's because it adds a lot more. You can either see more of the sky or you can even see more of the earth. And so like if you're doing in your garden, you could just see more of the rest of the garden versus just focusing in on that one thing.
Yeah, and I think there's something like in, how humans see things as well, that, when we place those things in a third section, that it just really appeals to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the other things that you talk about is that you want to have all of these other things when you're taking the picture. But then in addition to maybe having the flowers and the plants, what you want to get in there, maybe have some human element in there too, right?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of humans in photos. What I do for my job is I photograph people. So I think anytime you can add like a human element, whether it is an actual human or like an idea of that a human was there, like a swing or a wheelbarrow or something, like I think
a garden gnome. A
garden gnome, absolutely. I think it adds like a visual interest and makes people want to be like, okay, I feel connected because there was a human in this image.
It helps draws you in too. Yeah. And it does, it tends to, and we're not necessarily talking about like pictures that you're intending to be in galleries.
No.
But, if you want to, again, whether it's for your Instagram or whether you're going to print these for yourself and put them up on your wall, it is nice to have some of those elements in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's good to remember too, like, why do you garden? Yeah. And often it's for, the enjoyment of other people. So if you can somehow add them into it, or I think it just makes like a photo just far more interesting and more meaningful as well.
Yeah, like here in your backyard, obviously you've got the gardens, but then you've also got areas for people to sit. Yeah. You've got areas for people to kind of congregate and look out on the garden. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're saying, it's you garden with that in mind, that other people can come over and enjoy it, and you can entertain there, or you can just have dinner out there. Yep. Something like that is always kind of nice to have, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and again, like I think that's a fond way, when it's the dead of winter and it's cold and it's brown and you're like, oh, I miss my garden. If you can look back on photos, not only to see photos of your beautiful life that you helped, foster in your garden, but if you could see other people enjoying it as well, I mean, hopefully that brings you joy. I know it does for me. Like sometimes, in February, I'm like, well, I need a little bit of garden inspiration, and when I can see that a picture of my 9-year-old son is like smelling flowers. I'm like, oh, that's why I do it.
But we don't need to do that on February 4th.
No, we don't.
Which is Britta and I share a birthday.
Yep, we're
I'm
birthday
significantly older than you, but we do share a birthday. And
With Dan Quayle.
With Dan Quayle, that's
Yes.
right. And the guy who played Mr. Drummond on Different Strokes.
Well, there you go.
Yep. And I'm trying to think, there are
Clint Black?
Clint Black.
Yes.
Yes.
February 4th is a great date.
February 4th. Oh, it's a true American holiday for so many reasons.
I don't know why it's not in the calendars yet.
Yeah, there's a couple. I think Natalie Imbruglia.
Wow.
I think she's one of us too.
Oh, that's
Go
cool.
Aquarius.
We need a name.
Well, we're going to take a quick break and we come back more with Britta the Photographer.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
All right, we're back. Don's off this week, but I'm here with Britta Trygstad, Britta the Photographer, as you are known professionally, but fans of yours on Instagram may know you by another name, and that's the Lady of Thrift.
It is the Lady of Thrift.
So you are a thrifting connoisseur?
I would like to say I am.
Enthusiast?
Enthusiast to the extreme, yes.
Yeah. And it takes sometimes, there's different things I look for when I go thrifting, whether it's furniture or different things.
Yeah.
But one of the great things to always look for in thrifting, and sometimes you can find some really great scores there, is garden material.
Yeah. Or even, things that you can place in your garden, like
Right.
fun little vintage finds that you can be like, well, this is a flower pot now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or things I haven't had any luck finding, but it'd be nice to find something like a trellis,
Yeah.
or nice to find something that could be like a little outdoor sculpture.
Well, if you would do garage sailing, summer
Oh.
in the Midwest is prime garage sailing season, and thrift stores don't tend to have a lot of gardening things. Every
Yeah.
once in a while, you'll find like a catch pot, but we need a proper pot for our beautiful plants.
Right.
And sometimes you'll find garden tools and things like that, but garage sales and estate sales, man, that's where you find, the best garden stuff.
So what have been some of your best thrifting garden finds?
Oh, I hit up this great estate sale a couple of years ago that had garden tools.
Ooh.
And John, you're in my shed right now. You can
Yep.
see there's quite a bit of garden tools. I would say a third of them are from that garage sale. They're just like shovels, and I got a hoe, and I got, I think I got the little rake things like that. I mean, it was like a nice older gentleman's old shed, and he just had all these garden tools from years and years of collecting, and they were ready to get rid of them, and I was like, I will be here for this.
And a lot of times those are things that people are not looking for. They may be looking for like what they consider more real treasures. But, gardening tools, if you're buying new, it's fine.
Yeah.
But you can sink a lot of money. It's a good investment because you're going to have them for a long time. But if you can find them secondhand,
Yes.
you're going to get a really good discount on something that's, for the most time, those are built to last.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those older tools, too, if they've been around, for 30, 40 years, they're probably going to be around for another 30, 40 years. They're high-quality metal tools, and so anytime I see tools at a sale, I'm very excited.
I have broke my fair share of shovels in my day, but I think that's more due to user error than it was to the quality of the material. If you get a good shovel, it will last.
Well, and a lot of those older
use.
shovels too, you can replace the
handles,
handle.
right?
Yeah, so that's kind of the cool thing about those older tools too.
And Don and I in the winter, you can check back, or we can post it later, post a link to it. We'll do shows on how to care for your tools in the winter to make sure that they last. But it's also, like you were saying too, being able to find garden pots too.
Yeah.
Because some of these big garden pots, if you were to buy new in a store, you'd be spending, if they're ceramic, they would be over $100.
Yes.
And sometimes you can get some really good things that really add a lot of impact to a garden. If you can get those relatively cheap, that's a really, I should say inexpensive, but that's a really good ad for a garden, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, like I said earlier, like finding unique things to place in your garden. I was just in a garden, photographing a garden for a friend a few days ago, and she found a giant spindle, that they do for cable.
Oh,
wire.
Yeah.
She found this giant spindle. She loves doing when there's garbage week, she'll troll and find all sorts of things. So she found this giant spindle, and then she put, wood around it and made it into a giant planter.
Oh, smart.
Which I thought was just the most brilliant way to use, this object that was going to be thrown away into her garden, and it was beautiful.
That is one of there's a lot of great things that come with social media, but the ideas that people have, sometimes they don't always pan out. And it's more so on the cooking idea, I found out, than the making things. But people are very creative, and they can figure out ways. And so again, if you can buy stuff secondhand, not that we're taking any business away from stores, but there's opportunities to find things too that can be used for that. And that's really kind of nice.
Yeah, I have a really good friend who loves to take old bowling balls, and then actually her son, it's like his favorite craft. He will put little gems all along the bowling balls, and then they place them around their garden as little sculptures in their garden, and it looks really actually kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so it's just always really kind of nice because you also never know what you're going to find. Too. So it's the kind of I always think there's kind of a joy, maybe, or it's a thrill, I should say. There's sometimes you can find these great thrills.
Yeah, and sometimes when you can find, some of those vintage items and then, use them, repurpose them as pots or as little sculptures in your garden. I think when people are going through your garden, it's like these little delight points.
Yeah.
And it just adds more, again, like the fun human element to gardening, and just, you're like, oh, I would never have thought about using, that old picture as a plant pot. I think it's super fun to do that.
And then also, too, sometimes especially more so at estate sales or sometimes at garage sales, not so much in thrift stores, but, looking out, you've got some really nice wood box planters.
Yeah.
Sometimes at these places, you can find the material that, to buy cedar or new is really pretty expensive. And it can be cost prohibitive. But if you can find somebody who's downsizing their wood shop, or if they've got a garage and they've got pieces left over from previous projects, you can buy the material you need that could help your garden along quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think it allows that moment of creativity for you. For a lot of people, I know myself included, my garden is kind of the place where I get away, and I'm always creative in probably everything I do. And so doing things in the garden and creating new things is just another way to show my creativity and not my job. And so things like that, where you can say, repurpose an item and be like, okay, I have this item. How are we going to make it awesome? I think that's such a great exercise for anyone to do.
And something that I find an inordinate amount of joy in, the things that I would never really want to buy at a store, things that are so unsexy and unenjoyable by themselves. Like I see you've got some chicken wire around plant. And if you can find that, if you can find a roll of something like that, you will use. And that will save you some money too, doing that. So that's always kind of a nice thing. Yeah,
any kind of fencing, especially I live here in Moorhead, and the bunnies are extra awesome this year.
Yeah.
And so, anytime you can kind of find supplies like that, that's good.
And tomato cages, too.
Tomato cages, yeah. And it's amazing to me how many tomato cages you'll see on,
Cleanup day.
Cleanup day.
Yes.
Oh, man. And some nice ones, too. So I'm not a huge, when it comes to thrifting, I'm pretty much a thrift store, garage sale person. I don't love to do, the cleanup week. It just gives me a little bit of anxiety with all the cars going around. But there's a tomato cage. I probably would pick it up because it's a free tomato cage.
Stop for that. The other thing I found too is sometimes you can find good sections of garden edging.
Yes.
And so that's, another thing that's for free, and that would be maybe $20.
Speaking of, I was at our garbage transfer station here in Moorhead, and they recently built a new transfer station. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And I was bringing some, we just built a deck on our garage. I was bringing some of the pressure treated wood that we can't use. I brought it to the transfer station. But the lady there was like, hey, if you want any of these items, you can have them. There was a bunch of patio block.
Oh.
Really high quality patio block there. I'm like, I'm going to take that.
Yeah.
Have it out back. And I'm like, I'll figure out something to do with that patio block. This is going to be great.
They'll find a place eventually.
Yeah. Things like that I think are great to reuse. Otherwise, it would just go into the landfill. And what use is it there?
Just going to take up space.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Britta, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for
Yeah.
inviting us over to your backyard.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Too bad Don couldn't be here, but I
Yeah.
think he'll be back next week.
Amazing.
And we'll look forward to talking to you down the road and maybe getting some more tips on photography in your garden. And if people want to find you, what's the best way to find you?
You can find me online on my website. It's www.britta, Britta, thephotographer.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook.
And what are your handles there?
At Britta The Photographer. Easy peasy.
Easy enough. Britta, thanks again for having us over.
Yeah, thanks, John.